Prince Jeff is around the circle. I'm with Stacey Wynn. Stacey is a coach and author and a deconstruction theologian, which is we may get into because I also have an affinity for that sort of topic. But we're talking about Enneagram Eights and misconceptions today. Welcome, Stacey.
Thank you so much, Jeff, for having me. I've been looking forward to this, and I love following your work. So thanks for what you do.
Thank you. Recently, especially after the publication of our first book, I've heard a lot from folks who are typing, mistyping, and especially around eights, trying to clean up some stuff. And it's mostly about, from eights, talking about how the general stereotypes concerning eights, in Enneagram world in particular, aren't capturing the hearts of eights and what's really going on. And this leads to mistyping. Specifically, 6 3s and 1s can easily mistype as eights, especially when the work isn't quite done well. And really want to focus in on some of those things, the elements of eightness that many of us don't know on one front, and the elements that eights are generally accused of that actually are some other type. And so going down those two paths is kind of what I would love to have a conversation with you about. We had just dear listener, Stacey joined us for our online workshop. We had a great conversation on this front, which you can hear online. But I wanted to dive in further. So with that in mind, do you have anything that comes immediately to mind as I bring up that topic?
As I was learning about the Enneagram, it's been, I don't know, now about 5 or 6 years, I guess. And I resonated with some of the material. One of the first things I think I resonated with was the word intimidation. So there are people that say that eights will typically hear throughout their lives that they're intimidating. And actually, that was one of the things I read that really helped me quickly to zone in on eight. I remember as early as, 7th grade was the first memory I picked out, and I'm 54. So I have heard that term over and over again for years. And as I learned the Enneagram, this idea of eight energy and the energy that we bring into the room is something that I recognize and I agree with. It's not anything I can say that I sense, but I am, when I'm doing my work, I'm very aware of the impact when I watch body language and things like that. So I've had to come up with some tools and reminders for myself to consider my impact and just my energy and how I navigate interactions with people.
There is the way that we experience ourselves, and then the ways that other people experience us, and just how different that can come across. I too share that. The way that I feel like I'm coming across is often interpreted very differently from my intentions. And I find that very frustrating because I assume that you're like me and you actually care about relationships.
I do.
Care about connecting with people.
I do. And then I think the things that don't, some of the top of stack things that don't resonate with me are, one thing I don't like as a coach too that uses the Enneagram, I don't like how eights always have the leadership verbiage around type, because all types are leaders and we all lead, in unique ways. So I think that's one area where documentation can be better, is just assuming that eights want to be in positions of leadership. I don't think that's the truth. I think that, and I've heard people use this term, that we will fill a vacuum.
Mm-hmm.
And I have experienced that time and time again. I like to lead. I like to be in positions of leadership because that allows me to, pull people together, and I've got that social subtype, so I do like the being part of something and moving something forward, and empowering people, and I can do that when I'm in a position of influence. And if I sense that an organization or team or group is not being led well, then that will turn on that kind of, then I get a focus on, okay, how do I fix the situation? What can I do to make this a better experience? And that comes through, I think, at varying levels of health, depending on the context. If someone's being mistreated, then I might jump in a lot differently than if it's just strategy for a team over time or something like that.
Filling the vacuum is something you do resonate with.
Mm-hmm.
Boom.
Yeah.
Perfect. I think I heard that.
But it's not because I have to. I don't want, there are so many times that I would prefer not to be. In fact, I think I'd much prefer to be second in command, because there are aspects of a leader's role that are very administrative or, just not as impactful from my perspective, that I know need to be done, but it's not really what I want to do.
Right.
And so leaving space for someone who likes to do that kind of stuff and to be part of the conversations or the networking or the things that I think, for me, take away from the energy that I want to put into something,
Yep.
So
I resonate with that.
Yeah.
Talk about, and then we'll get into like I listed out top 10 misconceptions about eights, which I would love to get to in a second. But you brought up getting energized and feeling kind of the pull when you see others being mistreated. Would you talk about that for a minute?
Sure. Yeah, that description of 8 as an advocate for the underdog, maybe not an underdog per se for me, but anytime people are being abused or are being told incorrect information, making decisions, I'll tell you, organizationally, one of my pet peeves is when people are treated as just kind of pawns to get work done, and without really being mindful about how people resources are utilized. And, I sense that there's a right way and a wrong way to do things. I'm not necessarily having to have my way, but I want to know that the way that the choices that people are making are built from a place of integrity and concern for not only the outcome, but also how we get from here to there. Because I think that for me as an 8, I feel that there's a need to influence and motivate people well, to take care of people, because if I care about the outcome and I put time into how we reach the outcome, and I make that as holistic and as positive experience as I can, the outcome's going to be even better.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's something that I see in 8 literature that doesn't ring true, is that we're just focused on the end result. And I don't think that's the case, because part of our view of the end result and getting from here to there is all of the pieces that are part of that, and making sure that they all move forward in the best way possible. So I'll pause there and see if that's the direction you wanted to head.
No, I think that's very helpful subtext though for a lot of what we're going to be saying. And in my view, just to bring this forth, I've said this numerous times, but I think the most difficult types to understand are 2s, 5s, and 8s. Riso and Hudson do great work on this in terms of saying the energy of these types is very outward focused. And in my experience, and I think this is intuitional, I just have a difficult time reading those 3 types especially now that I'm informed about Enneagram and have a radar for what to look for. Those 3 types generally mask a lot of the underlying motive because the energy is outward to get what they want. And so just with that in mind, this is why I've really tried to elevate 2s, 5s, and 8s more to talk about their inner life.
Sure.
And so the rest of us can kind of understand that. I have a child that's a 5. I have a child that's an 8. And I'm excited to talk to you about that. So if a person is loud, forceful, and confrontational, they most definitely, I should say, are an 8. Isn't that right, Stacey?
Have I been that? Yes. But is that how people would usually see me? No. And gosh, I think that I've interacted with so many different types that I see that more often in other types than I do in 8s. And it's interesting, when we just kind of sit back and look, like you said, observe and call into mind some of those stereotypes, because we all, you can catch us on a bad day and you can catch us on a day when, we're okay. But there are certainly, my mom is a 1, my daughter's a 1. There are certainly times when I feel like my mom was, or my daughter is, much more combative than I am as a 1. And, and I've worked with 3s, and sometimes 3s are very laser focused on the outcome, and that can cause friction with me as an 8 working with a 3. It's not just the outcome; it's how we get there that's important. So no, I think I have the capacity to be aggressive and assertive, and to stomp my foot and tell people how I really feel. But I don't think that's a norm for an 8.
I think this is my experience, is that most 8s I know have a lot of, you can tell intuitively, you can tell the energy is there, but it seems to me to be very withdrawn energy that is tangible but under the surface, as opposed to the anger that you see in 6s, which is in your face. Which the anger that I put forth can be very, as you were kind of saying, it's just very upfront. 3s who have a sense that they are supposed to be strong in a culture to get what they want can certainly look assertive and dominant, because it's all a mask anyway. But truly authentic 8s aren't that's not the motive.
And I wonder, Jeff, if it's just having such a close relationship with anger that helps us as 8s to not pull on, like, I don't have to pull on that. It's something that's always there that helps inform me and drive decisions, but it's not my fuel per se.
You would say that anger is not your fuel?
In a conflict, like, I'm not going to lead with anger.
Ooh. What do you lead with?
In a conflict, I lead with being direct about how I feel, but making sure that the other side is heard.
Yeah.
And then going into, I think I lean kind of heavy on 7 in this, but I like to lean toward, and it could be 9 too, but how do we find some common ground from here? That the anger that leads to conflict that's not healthy, when that happens, it happens infrequently for me. And that is, I know when I get to that point, when I've lost all other ways of dealing with a particular person, as an example, then that to me is not necessarily an outburst. It's much quieter, and it's just, I'm drawing a boundary and cutting off that relationship. So it's no longer a relationship for me.
I'd be curious of your thoughts on this. My pitch on anger has routinely been that it is the underlying feeling that emerges for 8s, 9s, and 1s when their agency is thwarted, that we get what we want in the present, and we desire our will to be enacted. For eights and nines in particular, I feel like that's much more personal space. For me, it kind of and it may be because I'm a sexual one, but it goes outward much more. But that's been my sense of eightness, is that the anger isn't there until somebody actually enters your space, pushes that button that may elicit a feeling of vulnerability, and then the energy kicks. And do you relate to that, or anything else to add?
Yeah, I think for me, it's being dismissed.
Oh,
So
like in your value?
it, I get angry if someone dismisses my view, dismisses even asking me if I have an opinion. So if I feel dismissed in the interaction, then that makes me angry. And if I feel, and that I think goes along with that betrayal aspect that I do resonate with, which is sort of right along there, is if you're going to think something about me that's not even true, you didn't even talk to me about it. Like
Yeah.
that makes me angry because, I feel like, it's kind of right there, that being dismissed. But on top of being dismissed, you're taking a whole other view of me than is warranted.
The justice element is something that I didn't add, and that should be added. And nines will say almost the identical thing that you just said, in terms of not being honored for their contribution and their presence not mattering. But I also have I have a very, very strong radar for things being as they ought to be.
Mm-hmm.
What counts as justice, what counts as what should be, is going to vary from all across the board. But that is likewise where my anger gets tipped.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and anger is something. My partner's a 5, and he, when he is angry about something, his expression of it is much different than mine. I think of his anger expression as the low end of my anger expression. So I can sit there and watch it unfold, and it's, I will tell him, I'll listen to the situation or whatever it is, and it's more like anger has him. Anger moves him, and for me, anger doesn't move me. Anger is part of my decision-making process, but it's not something that that comes out in an kind of, what's the word, unorganized kind of way. Like things are woven together in me if I'm angry. Like it's part of the wiring there, and it may influence how I make a decision or how I communicate. But I notice in him, and maybe in other types, that anger comes out, and it's not thought through. It's not formulated. It feels a lot different for me.
Yeah. Is it anger as the energy behind decisions versus anger as the fruit, the reactive manifestation of something else that's happened?
Yeah, isn't it? It's so weird to talk about anger because it just is. Like I feel it all the time. Like really, as I catch myself during the day, sometimes I will feel angry, and then it's interesting to me because I'm like, well, what is that about? What's my reaction there? And it's internal. Rarely is it external. I have gotten myself into trouble with my body language, especially in my corporate life back in the day. So I had a boss, luckily, who helped me with some feedback and would tell me that, I shouldn't be a poker player because you can read it on my face. If I have lost patience with someone, or I disagree, or, something's going down, and we had some contentious things that happened at work. And she got to the point of saying, you know what I'm going to do is I'm going to kick you under the table if you've got the face on. Because honestly, I was like, I have no idea that I'm doing it. At that point, I was like, I have no clue. So she would kind of tap my foot, and I would recognize that I was in that facial expression typically was I was frustrated. I was feeling impatient. I was angry about how things were unfolding because I felt, they weren't looking at the appropriate facts or asking us for our feedback or whatever it was, whatever situation it was. But it went back to that dismissal, that betrayal, that not highlighting the appropriate information. So that it's kind of a justice flavor.
Yeah. And also, and I share this, a less valuing of the image in order to get what we want. Directness, truth, candor. These are tools that we have. This is a common conversation I have with my 3 wife, that I am just very low ability to adjust how I am coming across for the sake of getting things done. I'm incredibly
and being
direct.
willing to say the hard things, right? So just being the person that will speak up in the room. Sometimes, depending on your industry or your organization, the culture, especially for female eights, it's there's just not a home for that. The culture isn't suited well for that experience.
Yeah.
But I can't be any other way. So if I had to tie my hands behind my back and not say something like for a long period of time, I couldn't do it. I just wouldn't be able to stay in a culture like that.
Right. All right. Second misconception is that eights clearly don't care about relationships or your feelings. How does that strike you?
I think that it is a valid point of feedback, because while I don't do it on purpose, I do believe that I will gloss over feelings as I formulate a plan or a reaction to something. It's just not part of my equation unless I'm doing it on purpose. And so I think it's valid feedback to remind me that I need to be more feeling in my decision making or whatever it is. So yeah, I think it's good feedback, but I don't believe that it is because I don't have a heart and I don't care. I think I mentioned this in the other session, but I think it was Joey Shuey or Suzanne Stabile that said that eights probably have 10 people in their lives that they formulate really close, trusting relationships with. And I do believe that. I think that my inner circle is small. And I give my whole heart to the people that are in that circle. And outside of that inner circle, people that I see as in my charge, or if I'm leading them or I'm somehow connected to them, then I want to have their best interest at heart. And I can tell you a story about how I made that shift, if it's helpful, because I remember it, and it was probably, now 15-ish, 20 years ago. But when I was leading a large organization, one of my direct reports came to me and she told me this. She said, people here in your department know you know your stuff. They know you've got their backs, but they have no idea who you are as a person. They can't connect with you, and they don't feel like you know them. And that was a huge turning point for me, because I was super impressed with her, by the way, for giving me that feedback. And that's one of the most powerful moments, I think, in my self-awareness journey before the Enneagram. But looking back at that through the Enneagram lens, I was thinking and doing and thinking and doing and thinking and doing, and that was what I did. And in that moment, I recognized, being someone who wanted to be a good leader, up to that point, I just thought I was doing that. And then being able to see, actually, no, I'm not. Like, I'm missing this component of influence. And then I had to figure out, okay, well, it's not who I am naturally to be this relatable. So now what? Now, how do I make this work for myself?
Yeah.
And that became, my work of how do I use my thinking and doing to help me to be a better relationship, a better relator.
Mentioned external energy a minute ago, but that small circle of trust, I think, characterizes not only eights, but I think it's an entry point for twos and fives as well, who sometimes don't appear that way, especially twos. But I think twos do have a small circle for the most part, even though they may look as though they're relational. But I don't think that's this is just a characteristic that's worth naming, that this is actually true of eightness, that what I see is the sense of vulnerability that's underneath eightness can influence how the eight embraces people around them. Mm-hmm. And the eight may not see it, but others will feel it in the way that you're saying. And I actually think this is wisdom, like there's lots of people that will screw up your life if they get a little too close and affect everything that you're doing. I am idealist that I am. I let way too many people into my circle, and then it does great damage. And so anyway, that's why.
Yeah, and I think
it's kind of a balancing.
It hasn't happened often, but sometimes I can care a little bit too aggressively.
Yeah.
So caring more about an outcome than someone else does, like someone else's outcome. So, again, from a corporate perspective, like seeing potential in someone that works for me and working with them on that, wanting to empower them to succeed and them not wanting that for themselves.
Yeah.
Like being able to boundary that is hard, because I think that's that advocacy part of me that just wants to keep trying.
I'd like to push into that. So I'm presently in a situation where a family member is an addict, and I have intentionally told them that they're no longer getting empathy from me, because they're getting that from all these other folks. And what they're going to get from me is a lot of energy towards forward motion, and me saying, I get that these are the places that you're in pain, and I don't care, because that's not going to solve your problem. It's not going to move anything forward. I don't know if this is the right move, by the way.
Yeah.
This may be terrible in terms of counseling, but this has been my posture, because I've seen other people in my family who are addicts die over the course of a decade in miserable ways, in ways that, like, I really wish I would have said something. I might be going overboard now, but there's something long story short, there's something to be said for the person who is able to step beyond all the emotions that a lot of people use to not change, get better, or do good for themselves or the family members that are close to them. And they need somebody to be far more loyal, direct, protective, honest, but in a way that doesn't elevate the emotional life as a trump card. I don't know if you have thoughts on that, or I'm just speaking your language, but this is presently something in my heart.
Yeah. No, I'm sorry that you're going through that too. I can draw a connection there with some of the work that I do in the advocacy space. So with women who are going through destructive marriages, for example.
Right.
And having navigated that already myself and understanding, the before and the during and the after, and how great the after is. Mm-hmm. Like, I can catch myself sometimes not being able to meet people in the moment, which is already a struggle for me as an eight.
Yeah, right.
But when I'm trying to, be with them in that moment and understand what they're up against and be able to help them see a little bit down the road, I can get impatient with what they're putting up with for themselves. And that's hard. It's such a hard place to be. I think it's that line sometimes too, I think of as kind of that being that problem solver and wanting to help people solve the problem. And also, at some point there's a boundary that you have to draw, because it becomes unproductive for you and for them. And maybe they need more time to sit in it. But that doesn't mean that I have to. So I don't think that relationship means that I have to stay with people, to kind of flip the script. Like if I'm in a relationship with someone that's not a healthy relationship, what I have to learn and what I have is that they can continue to recover without me. I don't have to be there with them in it. And in fact, it might be great for me and for them for me to remove myself from that, because we're not aligned. Like relationships, we have to be aligned, values and all of that, and they can be themselves and I can be myself, and then we get to check the alignment. And if we're not in alignment, we need to set it aside for at least a time. But that's so hard. It's so hard to do in real life with people that we love.
There you go. I'll have to I'm self-critical one that I am overanalyzing this element of my approach, but not very happy about it.
Yeah.
So let's talk about eights who are always domineering bullies.
Let's do. No, I don't want to.
This also seems a misconception.
You can't make me.
That's right. Well, that actually feels more eight. The stereotype is that the eight is pushing people around, expressing their will in ways that dominate the room. That doesn't strike me as what I see with most eights. It may come out at times, but that does not seem like the normal deal.
Yeah.
What say you?
I think at our worst, well, I hate speaking for other eights, but at my worst, I think I can be subversive.
Yeah.
So it may not be out in the open where a lot of people see it, but man, I can do a lot of damage from the ground up. And that's not always at my worst. Sometimes that's at my best, I guess. That's the same skill. I could use it for good or for evil. But that is, I think, sometimes things do need to be torn down. And I think the way that eights might do that is with a really precision, like a scalpel, not necessarily bull in the china shop.
I think that's correct. I think bull in the china shop is much more characteristic of other numbers. I think that especially more reactive sixes can come across that way. Some fours can come across that way. Some ones can come across that way. In terms of the energy is not thoughtful, and I think you're spot on there. That the scalpel is much more of is a better metaphor.
And it's really painful too. Like
for you or for others?
I think for other people. Yeah, absolutely.
But that pairs with the honesty, the directness, the often the diagnostic thinking of eights, which can be very targeted toward this is the problem, and it's a problem because you're making the rest of us vulnerable given your ineptitudes. Yeah. And let's talk about that. I had one time, I had not my boss, but 2 levels above her came to me one time and said, like, I rarely talk to this person. And he said to me, I just get the feel for you that you don't appreciate leadership just because of the title. And I said, absolutely. And
absolutely, I don't.
Do you?
But the thing was, he was really talking about how I felt about him.
Yeah.
He understood that I didn't have much, many good feelings about his leadership. As I was pretty open about what I agreed with and what I didn't agree with. So as I recollect that moment, it felt like pressure for him. Like, you need to be respectful of me because I am your boss's boss. It's like, you know what? No, I don't actually. That's not how it works for me. Welcome to me.
Should be how it works. Doesn't work for most people. There is a difference. I mean, and there is the power element there. He's asking for deferral at a power level. It may be the case that you're an expert and I should defer to your opinion. You've gone through medical school. You've done 50 hours, 30 years worth of clinical work, and you've seen X, Y, and Z take place, and you can put forth your candid opinion. It's very different from saying, I earned the badge of manager, and now you will do what I say.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. And that's part of just understanding management anyway. And I think all types, come through that process in their own unique ways. But I do think as people, as humans, sometimes when we consider what management means, it's I tell you what to do and you do it. Yeah. And that's what being a leader means. And that's not it. Like, that's not it entirely. So, being a leader means not only do I have to carry my stuff, but I've got to find the best way to help you carry yours. So in essence, thinking of the 9 types, I have to figure out how to communicate in 27 other ways to motivate people. And that's, tough work as leaders, to be able to do our own thing and also try to help other people do their thing well.
Yep. That's well said. Well, you're an 8. Obviously, misconception. All 8s are fearless. We've seen 8s. Nothing under the surface of, fear or anxiety. What say you?
No, I think it's a core human emotion, right? I don't think that fear is like anger for me. Anger is something I'm really familiar with. I don't often find myself to be fearful. Insecurity, I find myself to feel insecure in different situations. The work that Suzanne's done with orientation to time is really pivotal, I think, to this whole fear thing, because being an 8, I'm just always moving forward. And that forward momentum, the fear is just it's not part of that. Like, I continue to march forward. And fear is more, perhaps, in the present moment, kind of a thing to deal with. Now, insecurity might be something that I find myself in sometimes. Like, am I doing the right thing right now? For me, right. That insecurity is when I'm considering other people, though. So in essence, in that moment of being insecure, those moments are beyond just me and what I want. They concern, my daughter or my partner or my life in general. Like, I have to think about things differently. It's not a forward momentum. It's that I got to consider this, and there are things that I'm not sure of.
Yeah, that's good. My mental map of Enneagram would have that when 8s move into stress, that they're going to pick up a lot of 5 tools. My assumption is that alongside that is going to have some anxiety and quote unquote fear. Would that be fair to say, or do you not experience that?
So the tool that I use with the Enneagram has given me a lot of insight into this about myself. So interestingly, and I think of all of our connecting lines as resilience lines. That's kind of how I refer to them in coaching, because I think if we're at our best, those lines that we connect to help us to adapt through different situations, and learning how to do that well and go to high side and all of that is part of it. But they're all resilience lines in my mind. I was always perplexed about myself as I met other eights because I didn't align all the time with how they felt emotions or even their thought process. And one time I was talking to someone about being an eight and explaining how I think about things, and they told me that's not an eight thinking style. I was like, what do you mean it's not an eight thinking style? Well, the tool that I use, and I think you can see it in Ready too, but I use the IEQ 9, and it tells us what our preferred pattern is in each center.
Mm-hmm.
My preferred thinking pattern is 6.
Okay.
So that locked it in like immediately. I was like, oh, okay, well, this explains a lot. And my preferred feeling pattern is 4. Like, okay, because I've always sort of resonated with the way 4s describe some things about their inner lives.
Mm-hmm.
So that has helped me to see when you say anxious, I think of those moments when my thinking becomes unproductive and I do the thing of the what ifs. Well, what am I going to do if this happens? And what am I going to do if that happens? And what am I going to do if that happens? And being able to kind of coach myself through that is more of a, you're gonna find a way through it because you do. It's what you do.
Do you experience an emotion there on that front of the what ifs that may constitute something like an anxiety?
Anxiety. Yeah, sure. Yeah. It's more of an anxiety of not knowing. So I would be at my best in a world where not only do I know where I know where I'm headed, I know the destination, like it's there and I know I'm going there. And I'm going to get myself there and I'll get whoever's with me there. Like I want to know, I want to have that and I want to make plans. So anytime something pops up that will require a decision, but I can't make one now, is a hard place to be. I think partly because of my forward momentum. I just want things to be decided. And I would feel better if things were decided. And that's probably a control part of 8. It's just wanting to know the outcome and being in control of the outcome.
Allows you to prep for your future and get centered. Yeah.
Yeah. So part of my work, knowing my wiring is, I could just call it decisioning. Like I need to slow my decisioning down because it's not always a strength to make a decision right now. It's usually a strength to postpone decisions because other things happen magically when I don't decide. Other people jump up and do things that maybe they wouldn't have. Situation changes and it's more clear what needs to be done. Like there are things that have value and I just let them be.
I think you're expressing something really important. We go into this in one of our chapters, but in terms of an orientation in time and how it gets expressed from 8s versus 3s and 7s, I see a lot of the same energy in future. Obviously the future tools that those 3 types employ as independent assertive types. We're going to focus on tomorrow to get what we want. And so much of your language there ended up being about control. So much of my wife's language is about her image and perception in relationships. And so much of my father's language about the future has to do about outrunning some stuff. And the underlying motive there, just really worth naming. I think you're bringing a lot of great language for the inner life of 8s there. And what may, especially when the energy of 8s can push forward a little bit, what some of the rest of us might feel as they're engaging those future tools.
Yes, I think I'm much better in relationships. Certainly Dave and I, my partner and I, have had to cross this bridge. He's a 5, I'm an 8. I want to plan. He wants to leave things open-ended. And that has been...
What's the motive there? Why does he want things open-ended?
Well, he overplans. So he wants to continue to research and bring in information and not make a decision yet because he might, find out something new tomorrow about it.
Gotcha.
So, we've been together now for 5 years, and early on, this was a major tension point. And
Yeah.
I'm so grateful that I was learning the Enneagram as I was getting to know him, because that was a big hurdle to have to cross, is the time orientation and just the momentum forward versus being more, not not momentum forward. Yeah. And that's taught me a lot about relationships. It's how valuable it can be to, each of us can stretch just a little bit. We have to find our way to do that, which requires us to talk about it, which requires us, to wrap some words around it. And it's been really helpful.
Bang. You want to talk about that for a minute? You have a relationship on the line. These are some of the most interesting of the Enneagram relationships. It's something I'm going to do quite a bit of work on here in the future. But when you think about your relationship on the line and that dynamic, what are some of the things that occur to you first?
Yeah. So one of the first things for my own past was recognizing the fact that I wanted to do things for him. I wanted to center him more. And with my background in a destructive marriage, I remember like that day when I recognized that I was doing something that I was kind of deferring to what he wanted. And I froze, and I was like, oh my gosh, I'm over functioning again. What am I doing? Is this a healthy, am I just not seeing it again? Am I in a bad place? And, recognizing that actually I was in my two. I was heavily in my two, and seeing the goodness of that and how that looks for me as an 8 to stretch into that, and that the way that I am less concerned with what I think an outcome should be, more honed in on the relationship and on, being present in that moment and observant in that moment. So that's been huge. So that's one thing. I think another area is our relationship with anger. So when he gets frustrated about something and going on at work or whatever, he spikes, and we call it he has a spike of anger. And I just want to laugh when it happens, because I'm just watching it happen, and I see like his anger just takes him and just runs with him. And so being able to hold that emotion going on and not feeling like I have to fix anything or do anything or being concerned that he's angry, right? I just recognize the benefit of using anger as a kind of a defining process. So I think that is helpful for him, for me to be that way. But we are able to relax well. He likes his space, I like my space, and we like our time together. So finding ways, to be independent and also build a life around things that we enjoy has been a beautiful thing.
It's lovely. All right, the more that I'm looking at my top 10 list, this may have to be a top 5. So I'll end with control. Like, clearly, you hate being controlled, and that means you're an 8. We started with you saying here are places that you're more than happy to surrender control. And I think that is very interesting. What are your thoughts on control and your relationship to that desire?
Yeah. I think once I have a trust level built, and I believe that people's motives and intentions are good, whether I agree with them or not. Like, if I believe that they have good motivation, good intention behind something, like that eases up for me. I don't feel so pressed to have to express my desire for what I believe should happen. So, I will also say that control, if someone is pulling my strings for an outcome and I feel my strings being pulled, then my antenna go up, because that kind of control is I don't believe, I think it's harmful. So I don't, I sense that really quickly. And I will push back on that.
Mm-hmm. That's perfect.
But yeah, there is something about, and I would call it decisioning, like that control of making decisions and heading in a direction. If I get uncomfortable, we haven't talked much about vulnerability, but if I feel vulnerable, I catch myself wanting to work around it,
Mm-hmm.
making decisions to get out of that feeling. And that is where I try to pause, because that vulnerability work is so important for me. And sometimes it's a good time to do that, and sometimes it's not a moment to do that. So I have to reflect on that a little bit. But that control kind of, I sense that in terms of my own feeling of vulnerability too.
Yeah. My sense with eights is, again, heavy radar for strength, competence. Does this person have severe personal oversight? And just the radar for that is severe. Mm-hmm. And most people don't. Most people can easily get picked apart on those levels. And the eights in my life seem to only entrust their well-being and the well-being of their families, if at all, to folks who have truly gone through fire and show themselves to have spines of steel. Yeah. And that I think, again, a very helpful thing. But the idea that like the eight won't surrender control, it may be the case that you're not worthy of the eight surrendering their control to you. So you should step up a little bit. It's more of an indictment of your aptitudes. That's how I read that.
That's good. And I think that those words stepping up are exactly what I would say, because I think it's more of a stepping up than a control issue. Like, I want people to do their best, and I want people to jump in and do things. And I always said, and I still do in leadership roles, the very first day, I'm looking for someone to replace me.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Like, I want that movement to happen. So I just want to see people around me take the initiative. And when I'm surrounded by people like that, it's that control isn't even a thing. It's just we're all doing our best work.
Yep. I think that's well said. Boom. All right. Well, I carved out just a couple minutes, because since you and I share an affection for and love for the overlap of theology and deconstruction, I did want to spend 5 minutes just picking your brain. And I imagine this is going to come out of type. When I think about deconstruction and I think about theology, I'm 100% what's the right thing to think, specifically how ought we to think about theology. This is where postmodernity and deconstruction come in. It's you are not, the approach to theology is problematic for most, and we need to really rethink how we're thinking about God and ourselves. When you come to it, what I heard it off mic, what I heard is that you are very aware of the people who have been abused by specifically Christian church structures, and it's time to do some business there. Am I wrong there? Is there anything else to add?
No, I think, and historically, to be able to look back and see the misuse of power and control over things like translations, harmful theologies that have kept women and queer people and people of color out of positions of influence in our churches. So those keeping people from doing their best work and for telling their stories. I think if all of us were to be able to tell how God meets us in our lives, then we would have a picture of who God really is, because there's just so, I describe it, I wrote about it like God is a disco ball. Every little facet of that disco ball is one person's view over time of God. And if we could just all give our stories, like, then we'd be able to dance together, right, under the big disco ball.
Under the big disco ball. This is a great way of thinking about the shift from modernity to postmodernity in terms of theology. The modernity says there's a singular view. Modernity says there's a singular interpretation. Modernity wants to lock this sucker down in a systematic way that extracts itself from the subjective. And postmodernity says you can't do that because we all look at truths from a certain vantage point, certain place in the world. That doesn't mean there's no truth. It means that how you read matters. We need to be our healthiest selves. Like one of the things about a disco ball is the shiny little square does need to get polished a little bit. Does need, like, if it's a cloudy, grungy little square, it's not going to shine very well. Yeah. So there seems to be a both and there for me. I'm talking all over the place. What are your thoughts?
You know, we get to talk about lament and grief and anger and bitterness, and also we get to talk about joy and love and compassion and patience. And God is in all of those things. But if we aren't listening to the voices of, and I'll just be specific now for women, I mean, if we aren't listening to the voices of women in Scripture, then women don't identify as well, you know, with how to live a life that follows God. I think that women have a lot to give to the church, and unfortunately, we're just not in the position in many ways for women to do that, so they leave. And I love Diana Butler Bass's book, Freeing Jesus, because she talks about, and I hear this time and time again in my work, is women who say, I followed God out of church. And the wilderness journey is the deconstruction journey. It's spiritual formation. I'm one of those people who just thinks, you know, I don't have to relabel it for myself. Like, I just think I'll be here forever. I want to be here. It's just a beautiful place for me to be. And we live lives that are sometimes maybe in church buildings and sometimes not, but we're divine beings all the time. So how we experience God takes on shape and form outside of what happens on Sundays. And that's part of what it means to understand our faith. And I think the more that we express that and experience that, the more we find our people, and then the better and healthier communities we're in.
Yep. Thing that I hear there is modernity is characterized, in my view, by a severe pragmatism and a severe hierarchical structure. And as was said, like, you lose so much of seeing the divine if you construct hierarchies in which only the people at the top somehow have access into the divine priorities, as opposed to the circle is much more the postmodern structure of assembly. We're going to circle up and each elevate the things that are most important to us. And pragmatism isn't the goal. There is something different that's the goal, and that is the communal shared unveiling of truths that require everybody. My own view is that we need to move beyond postmodernism into something like, you know, you do need people who are experts to speak and to have that valued. Not everybody can get around the circle and talk about vaccinations. There are a couple people that need to talk about vaccinations, and some people's opinions about vaccinations don't matter. So there's a problem with the circle at times. But as I think the thing that I think is rich and really valuable and really needs to take place is an abandoning of hierarchical structures in church. It just doesn't work. We've seen it fail over and over and over again.
Over and over. Yeah.
Bang. And notice the oneness that comes out in all of that. This is the right way to
This is the
do
right way.
things.
We can make it better by...
We can make it better. Let me tell you 28 other things for improvement.
I love it.
I'm so glad people are listening to me on this front, and that I have a lot of weight and have not lost friendships or jobs based on my opinions on these fronts.
Yeah. Sure.
Any last things we're saying there?
I just appreciate the time. I think that, you know, the more we talk to people who are different types, the more we understand about types. And so I just value that that you're having these conversations. And I love them. I love listening to the podcast and hearing all the different feedback from different people. It's been a great pleasure to take part of this conversation today. So thank you.
Bang. Stacey Wynn, coach, author. Stacey, where can people find your work? And you're obviously working with people, and so doing some service. What are your favorite ways to connect with people in terms of the work that you do for them?
Yeah, I'll send you my link tree. I have some links there. I do. My day job is in the corporate space. I coach and consult, but I do have a private coaching practice and work with people in all kinds of life transitions and faith transitions through that practice.